Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. And in our ongoing series on Nobel Prize winners, tonight we're going to talk about Dr. Reinhard Selten, who died recently at the age of 85. And Dr. Selten was a co-winner in 1994 of the Nobel Prize in Economics, along with John Harsanyi and John Nash, whose podcast we've done. They won the prize for their pioneering analysis of equilibria in the theory of non-cooperative games in the field of game theory. And we talked about that when we talked about John Nash. What Dr. Selten did is he refined the Nash equilibrium concept for analyzing dynamic strategic interaction by getting rid of the unlikely equilibria. He also refined the analysis of the concepts of restricted competition. Dr. Selten is the only Nobel Prize winner in economics from Germany, and I thought that rather than go over game theory again, you can learn all about that by going back to the Nash podcast. You'd hear a little bit about Dr. Selten and listen to parts of his Nobel interview. In his biography, Dr. Selten writes that he was born in Breslau in 1930, and at the time, Breslau belonged to Germany, and only German was spoken there. After the Second World War, Breslau became Polish, and the original German population was almost completely replaced by a Polish one. His father was Jewish and his mother was Protestant, and it was not easy for him to live as a half-Jewish boy under the Hitler regime. When he was 14, he had to leave high school, and the opportunity to learn a trade was denied to him. The only career open to him was that of an unskilled worker. Fortunately, it turned out that this did not matter much, since after about a half a year, his mother, his brothers, his sister, and he all left Breslau on one of the last trains out before all outbound railway traffic was stopped. His situation as a member of an officially despised minority forced him to pay close attention to political matters very early in life, and he found himself in opposition to the political views shared by the vast majority of the population. He had to learn to trust his own judgment rather than the official propaganda or public opinion, and it was a strong influence on his intellectual development. His continuing interest in politics and public affairs was one of the reasons he began to be interested in economics in his last high school years. He did most of his education in German universities, and he spent a little bit of time at UC Berkeley in the United States. Here in his Nobel interview, he talks with his interviewer on a number of subjects. He starts out by talking about when he found out that he won the Nobel Prize.
There was no telephone ringing. I was in the supermarket with my wife. We were shopping. Nobody was at home when the telephone was ringing. Usually you are called before, but that since we were away so long, they then announced it. Even if I was not yet knowing it. Didn't know it, but it was already announced. So when I came home, then there were a lot of people before my house, and I thought, what happened? Maybe something bad happened. Yeah, so somebody broke in or something like that. Yeah, now people are collecting there for some reason. I didn't know what. And I stopped the car and I went out of the car, and somebody came to me and said, I congratulate you. I congratulate you. I said, what? For what? So he explained to me. I said to him, yes, I have to get out first my wife from the car with a wheelchair to bring my things in, and I opened the door, and then everybody, these were all journalists, invading my house and so on. And it was so hectic that I didn't have much time to think about it at all. No? I was just trying to cope with the situation. Then the telephone was always ringing and all this, and I didn't really believe it. Not that it was a hoax, but I knew that it was too, but you don't get emotionally adjusted to it. You see that this is reported in television, but it has all an irreal flavor, not? Which for me, something I couldn't get really adjusted to. It took some time. I only got adjusted to it when we went in Stockholm to the city hall. Then I began to feel that this is real.
Here, Dr. Selten talks about how game theory is actually about the study of rationality. He refers to bounded rationality, which is the idea that in decision-making, the rationality of individuals is limited by the information they have, the cognitive limitations of their minds, and the finite amount of time they have to make a decision.
It is more the question, what would rational players do in a game? Maybe players are not always rational. I mean, we know now that they are far from rational very often. I mean, they are still boundedly rational, but not really rational. But nevertheless, it is an important problem to think about what rational players would do in a game. How would they interact? So game theory was concerned with the definition of rationality, regardless of whether people follow rationality or not. You have to know what it is. And that was the real question of rational game theory. It had to be pursued, even if I had done early experimental work, and I knew that game theory would not, maybe sometimes would be predictive, that in other cases it would not predict correctly human behavior. You wouldn't expect that it always predicts human behavior, but for a long time I was adhering to the idea of bounded rationality. I was convinced since I have read the work of Herbert Simon in the late 50s, I was convinced about the idea of bounded rationality, but nevertheless I felt very much compelled to explore the definition of rationality in game situations. It was a very important question, because it's not really clear what rationality should be in such interactive situations.
Here, Dr. Selten talks about some of the real-life implications of game theory.
I was always fascinated by the idea to do something about real world, about science, about applications to the real world. I wanted to rely on the expertise of people in the fields. So I worked together very successfully with a political scientist who was a real expert on the Middle East, Amos Perlmutter, and then I worked also very well with Avi Schmieder, who is a biologist. So I was always fascinated also by new ideas and concepts. I mean, this biological game theory. I did several types of work about several investigations of application of game theory to international relations.
Dr. Selten faced a lot of oppositional thinking in his career, and here he talks about how he dealt with it.
So in science, it's important to have an independent mind, to be able to follow your own ideas. My wife was important, also when we were young, she was helping me, even in my scientific work, she was helping me, and so that was important, but she never pushed me to do this or that. I mean, it's not like I was pushed, because I was always driven from within. Science was for me like a drug. I am addicted to research, let's say.
Finally, as we do with many of our Nobel laureates, we're going to get Dr. Selten's advice to young people going into academia.
I don't want to give you too specific advice, but they should. It depends also on their character. I mean, if they want to have a sure and normal career, then they should stay in the mainstream and try to be very quick and to do something and get their job. But if they are more willing to take a little more risk, they should enter a very young field and grow with it, rather than to enter an older field, to learn a lot in this older field, to make a lot of investment, and then go there with the mainstream. For example, bounded rationality is still very young, because there's very much which we don't know. I mean, it's very difficult. Usually these young things are very difficult. Yeah? And then people often say, oh, what can you do? I mean, we don't know what we can do here. But that's actually the challenge, that you don't know how to attack the problems. And these are the worthwhile problems where there still everything is confused and you don't know how to attack it and how to there is room for this, because if there is made progress, it is actually attention is paid to it also by people who do not want to go in this direction. It's not that I also learned this, the risk of an oppositional point of view is not as big as people think. I mean, if you take an oppositional point of view, people look at it with interest, even if they don't accept it completely. They may say, well, it's original, So it's not, of course, you have to present it in the right way and so on. It has to be, but it is, the scientific world is not the enemy of young, imaginative people. If somebody is young and brilliant and imaginative, he will be listened to, even if he is a little unorthodox. Will not prevent him to get ahead, I think. So somebody who is young has to know what he wants to do. Also, I mean, nobody should enter a field where he is not attracted to. He has to feel a real attraction to it, so that he can be captivated by the questions there. Yeah, because you have to get emotionally involved in these questions. You have to become a drug addict for this kind of scientific activity. Because if you just want to do it in order to get a career, it's already wrong.
Finally, his last bit of advice for those who want to know how to win a Nobel Prize.
People ask me, what do you have to do in order to get the Bank of Sweden prize? So then I say, well, if you ask this, you are already on the wrong track.
Well, as long as we're on economics, we're going to close tonight with the death of frozen orange juice. Well, technically it hasn't died yet, but it's on its way out after about 70 years. Frozen concentrated orange juice was invented in Florida in the 1940s, primarily as a way to provide juice for the military, readily storable and easy to ship. But frozen juice has been losing favor for years. Both the Wall Street Journal and Fortune report that on Wall Street, the once flourishing frozen orange juice concentrate market seems to be headed towards extinction. The concentrate began trading as a soft commodity in the 1940s and was served as the primary breakfast drink until the 1980s, when ready-to-serve juices were invented. Now the number of futures contracts is down about 70% from its high in 1997 and continues to deteriorate. So we may be seeing the last of frozen orange juice. Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. And there is one great song about frozen orange juice. It's by the English singer Peter Sarstedt, recorded in the 1960s. Ironically, frozen orange juice used to be quite popular in Great Britain. They had more trouble getting fresh oranges. But today, primary schools in the UK have banned fruit juices. Nevertheless, here's our tribute to the dying commodity, frozen orange juice.
I'll buy you one more frozen orange juice on this fantastic day. We'll walk the sunny hills of Madrid, laughing all the way. And if you feel you want to run down the ravine, a place that no one else has ever seen,